the virtue of kindness, being kind. I want you to hear a story. 20 years ago, I drove a cab for a living. When I arrived at 2:30 in the morning, the building was dark except for a single light in a ground floor window. Under these circumstances, many cab drivers would just honk once or twice, wait a minute, then drive away. But I had seen too many impoverished people who depended on taxis as their only means of transportation to drive away. Unless the situation smelled of danger, I always went to the door. So I walked to the door and knocked. Just a moment, answered a frail, elderly voice. After a long pause, the door opened. A small woman in her 80s stood before me. By her side was a small nylon suitcase. "Would you carry this bag out to the car for me?" she said. I took the suitcase out and returned to assist the woman. She took my arm and walked slowly toward the curb. She kept thanking me for my kindness. "Oh, it's nothing," I told her. "I just try to treat all my passengers the way I would want my mother treated." When we got in the cab, she gave me an address. Then she said, "Oh, by the way, could you drive through downtown? It's not the shortest way." "Oh, I don't mind. I'm in no hurry. I'm on my way to a hospice." I looked in the rearview mirror and her eyes were glistening. I don't have any family left," she said, almost to herself. "The doctor says I don't have very long." I quietly reached over and shut off the meter. "What route would you like me to take?" For the next 2 hours, we drove all around the city. She showed me the building where she had once worked as an elevator operator. We drove through the neighborhood where she and her husband had lived when they were newlyweds. She had me pull up in front of a furniture warehouse that had once been a ballroom where she had gone dancing as a girl. Sometimes she'd ask me to slow down in front of a particular building or corner. She would sit staring into the darkness, saying nothing. As the first hint of sun was creasing the horizon, she suddenly said, "Okay, I'm ready. Let's go now." We drove in silence to the address she had given me. It was a low building. 2 orderlies came out to the cab. As soon as we pulled up, they were solicitous and intent, watching her every move. They were expecting her. I opened the trunk, took out the small suitcase, carried it to the door. The woman was already seated in a wheelchair. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. "No, you don't owe me anything," I said. "Oh, you have to make a living," she answered. "Oh, there are other passengers," I responded. Almost without thinking, I bent over and gave her a hug, and she held on to me tightly. "You gave an old woman a little bit of joy," she said. "Thank you." I squeezed her hand, then walked into the dim morning light. Behind me, a door shut. It was the sound of the closing of a life. I drove aimlessly, lost in thought for the rest of the day. I could hardly talk. What if that woman had gotten in an angry driver earlier that morning, or one who was impatient? What if I had refused to take the run, or had honked once and driven away? On a quick review, I don't think I have done anything more important in all my life. I love that story. It sort of helps me allow life to make up its mind again. You need to remember that story. The times you will want to be anything but kind, because it is so much easier to bear a grudge and hate in return, or get back, or get even. Hate destroys the vessel it's kept in. Revenge never healed a wound. There's one thing all of us have in common: we've been mistreated by somebody. Some of you have known abuse, misunderstanding, and all of this has a way of siphoning your tank of kindness. It can make you hard, and you can get on with hard. You can get along with it. In fact, some will even respect you more because you're tough. But I urge you not to be. Be kind, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. When I am truly free of revenge and bitterness, there is plenty of room in my heart left for kindness. And not until. Do what's right. Do justice. Love kindness. Walk humbly with your God.
Maybe you were born a really nice person with a gentle, sweet personality, and being kind to people comes pretty naturally to you, but I think more of the globe is not that way than is. And the good news is we can change.
It's amazing what one kind word can do. We don't think anything about it, but to the other person, it breathes life into their spirit. Our words have the power to lift people, to help them get through a challenge, to push them into their destinies. When you tell someone, I love you, I'm proud of you, you did great on that project, you're not just being kind, those are healing words. We don't know what people are going through. They may smile on the outside, but on the inside, they're hurting, they're lonely, they're discouraged. Many people have wounds from the past, wounds from a relationship that didn't work out, wounds from people trying to push them down. And just a simple word of encouragement. I believe in you. I'm praying for you. A simple compliment. You look beautiful today. It's no big deal to you, but to them, it's helping heal the wounds. It's lifting their spirits. It's causing them to believe in themselves. Your words can be what keeps them moving forward. And God puts people in our lives on purpose so we can bring healing. Letting people know that you care does more than you imagine. You have the power to put someone on their feet. You have the power to keep them from falling into depression. You have the power to cause them to pursue their dreams. Be free with your compliments. You can think well of your friend all day long, but if you never tell them, they'll never know. God wouldn't have brought it up if He didn't want you to tell them. He wouldn't have put that thought in you if the other person didn't need it. You may not know them. It may not make sense to you, but God knows what He's doing. There's a reason they need your healing. Don't withhold it. Don't try to reason it out. In my early 20s, a young man started coming up to the gym to play basketball with us. He was a loner. He was very unfriendly, very cold. He never talked. Even during the games, he wouldn't interact with us. Most of the guys just ignored him. But something down in here told me to reach out to him and make him feel welcome. I found out that his name was Bo. When he would come into the gym, I would go over and say, "Hey, Bo, it's great to see you today." He never said anything. He just hit his chest twice and walked away. I didn't know what that meant, but I hit my chest twice and walked away. This went on for several years. I saw him 4 or 5 times a week. Well, I stopped playing basketball there, and I hadn't seen Bo in over 20 years. One Sunday, he showed up at church. I saw him afterwards. I thought, where do I know this guy from? He said, "I'm Bo. We used to play basketball together." That's the most I'd ever heard him talk. He went on to tell how he grew up in the projects. At 14, he started living on his own. Nobody wanted him. He never felt loved or accepted. He said, "One of the main reasons I went up to the gym was to hear you say, 'Great to see you today.' because nobody had told me that they were glad to see me. Those simple words, letting him know that I cared, were like life-giving water. Today, Bo is married. He introduced me to his children. He's setting a new standard for his family. What am I saying? Nobody is in your life by accident. Don't ignore what you feel on the inside, that compassion to encourage them, that desire to be their friend. Take time to make them feel loved. Doesn't have to be something big. Just good to see you. I believe in you. I'm praying for you. Just let them know that you care.
There's a song that is on Christian radio now, and I want to tell Dusty he needs to listen to it. I don't know the title, but I know the phrase in the song says, "I'm just a nobody that wants to tell everybody about somebody that can save you." I'm just a nobody. But I want to tell everybody about the saving grace of Jesus Christ. How do you go about doing that? You know, we just finished Sunday school today, and we talking about how you go about sharing your love, and you can't go around and tell everybody you love them. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Now, I don't know if the kids at school knew this, but about every kid, I have something on every kid. You know, I'll say something to them, have like a head nod or a fist bump, or I'll make a comment to them. And I've told a few kids that when I do that, you know, it's me saying I love you, because if I said it every time, it would be creepy. It would just be creepy. So I see this one kid and I do like this, or I see another kid and say nice hat or whatever, and that's the way I tell them that I love them. You know, we grew up in a time when kindness was a little easier to spot. And it's interesting that the last couple of years at school here, we taught 7 essentials to the high school kids, and the most important one that we shared most of the time was kindness. In fact, the bulletin board I noticed the other day is still up on spread kindness around, and I thought how interesting that is. But I grew up in a time when you drove down the highway in the old pickup truck and you waved at everybody. Remember that? You drove down and you waved. Now, you had certain waves for certain people. So many fingers up meant something to somebody, right? But you waved at everybody. And yesterday when we went to the funeral there in Beloit, Deb said, "Do you know everybody?" Because they were coming down the road and people were waving like the old days down that little highway to Beloit. I grew up when people said hello. Good morning. How you doing? Good to see you. You all right? Have a nice evening. Have a good day. Remember those days? Now people just walk past. I grew up in a time, believe it or not, when this farmer shared farm machinery with this farmer. They bought the hay rake together. And when this farmer was raking hay, this farmer wasn't. This farmer would wait until it's his turn, and then, believe it or not, if he broke it, he fixed it. You didn't ever have to worry about it coming over to your house broken. My dad and Joe Foljam shared equipment like that. I never, ever, ever remember any time anyone on either side was frustrated or mad, or my dad said anything bad about, well, we need that, or we got to have that next week, and he has it. No, they just worked it out through kindness, because they cared about their neighbors. One of the things we discovered while we were teaching the last couple of years about kindness was that kindness is the greatest factor of someone's success. You would think it would be intelligence or schooling or something like that. Kindness is the greatest factor in someone's success, regardless of the career you choose. I think that is amazing. I suppose you can be a doctor or someone that makes a whole bunch of money or whatever and not be very kind, and think about how people relate to you and want to be around you, and that might give you an indication. Because I used to say to the kids, you can be a doctor, but you can be a jerk and be a doctor. And guess what? I'm not coming to you to get any kind of help. And you can be a ditch digger and be the kindest, most pleasant ditch digger, and if you love that, I'll have you come every time and dig up my sewer line and my water line and my lagoon. Someone once said the greatest disease is not cancer. It's not heart disease. The greatest disease in our culture is being unwanted, uncared for, and unloved. And like the video said, you know, a lot of times we can put on a really good face, can't we? I'm fine. No, you're not. Rudeness and the lack of respect is on the rise in our culture. And I found some really interesting statistics about that in light of a study. Hi, John. John and I had a thing last year. It was one of those deals like I just mentioned, where we talked about with the kids to speak first. You know, we walked down the hall, we got this thing in our hand. I guess it's a little piece of glass or something. What do they call these things that you put in your hand you walk down the hall with? Cell phone. Okay, a cell phone. And you say, good morning, hi, how are you? Good to see you. What are you doing? Nice game, whatever. I'm not kidding, I did that many times last year. And there are how many kids at Fredonia High School trading from one class to another? 300 and some, whatever, in the hall. And I remember mentally keeping track. When I'd say, morning, how are you? Good to see you. Hey, what's happening? What's going on? Good job. Hey, hi. What's going on? Get after them. And there would be some mornings out of all those kids in different, the times that the hall would be full in between class changes, I would get 2 or 3 comments back. Hi, Mr. Myers. And it would be extremely a good day if somebody said it first and I didn't notice. And they said, hey, Mr. Myers. I'm like, oh, hey, how are you? So John and I had this thing. We had a contest last year to see who could speak first when we saw each other. And he'd get ahead. We kept score, you know, because we're kind of competitive. And he'd be down by 5, and then he'd come back and be up by 2 because he'd say hi first before I could. But the point of that was, you know, we need to speak first. How hard is that in light of kindness? Oh, but we live in a world where you're creepy. What are you trying to do? What are your motives? If you say hi to me, what are you trying to do? It's interesting that we don't smile as much as we used to. We don't smile. And in fact, I've had people say, what's up with you? You're smiling. What am I supposed to be? And that's normal? We don't smile as much. There is some There are studies out there that indicate 80% of the patrons, customers, whatever you want to call them, colleagues, are rude in the workplace. 80% of the workplace is filled with rude people. Now, I don't know where they did this study, but I'm hoping it's not Fredonia or Neodesha or Independence or any of those places like that. Girard, I hope that's not true. But 80%, would you like to go to work where 80% of the people are rude and discourteous to you? Oh, my. You ask a waitress, you ask somebody that works behind a counter, how many people say good things? How many people, when, you didn't have the meal right? We went to the state fair in Missouri last Wednesday on Senior Day. That's not senior high school students, by the way. And I'm discovering it's pretty cool to get old. I had to sign up to get old, by the way, so don't sign up if you're. I had to sign up and go through all this paperwork over the phone with some government official to get old. You have to sign up for it, so wait as long as you can. But once I got old, I discovered that you can go to the Missouri State Fair and get $3 off your entry fee to get in. Did you know you can go to the Missouri State Fair and they'll give you a sticker if you're a senior, and you can ride the tram for free all day long? So I didn't have to walk around. I rode from this station to that station. Mrs. Myers and I were like, this is great. We rode around the entire fairgrounds twice before we ever got off. And they're like 25 stops. This is great being old. And it was Wednesday. I'm supposed to be in school on Wednesday. I haven't been in school on a Wednesday at this time of year, or haven't been away from school for 44 plus 18 is like, 50 some years or more? So it was like amazing to be old enough to not have to go to school. But I noticed the people behind the counters, when we ate lunch, the lady got it wrong for this guy. He ordered a pulled pork and he wanted a hot ham and cheese, and she was going to have to throw it out. I said, I'll take it. I'll take it. Well, he'd taken it back there to his to his table and brought it back up. He could have spit in that thing, somebody said. I don't care. I don't want you in trouble as a clerk. And it was just made, so I took his hot ham and cheese. Had to pay for it anyway. But 80% of the people say it's difficult to be in service. Nearly 80% of the clerks in a store will ignore you as a customer. This is what some of this research says. And 90% of our population in this country will encounter a rude person every day. Do you think we might benefit from just a little kindness? Do you think it might help? Why are all these folks so hurt? Why is there so much lack of respect? Why is it that we watch on the news every once in a while and they show this wonderful story of kindness? Like the two guys that sat by this lady in a restaurant. Now they have this relationship with this elderly lady in this restaurant. They showed that on CBS News. She was eating by herself. Her husband had died, and these two young men kind of just went over and sat down and started visiting with her, and now they are friends. Well, a lot of times we are unkind because we don't feel good about ourselves. We talked this morning in Sunday school about we need to love our neighbor as ourselves because we are God's creation too. Not in an arrogant way or a selfish way, but we are to love ourselves because God loved us and died for us. But we live in a world where there's a lot of low self-esteem, is what a lot of people call it. We have a lot of personal problems. Well, I'm not kind because I got all these problems. Do any of you ever have any problems? We have a bunch of problems, don't we? We all have problems. We learn it. Believe it or not, kindness is one skill we have to practice. We just don't say, hey, I'm probably blessed with kindness, so I'm going to go out and be kind. No, we have to learn how to be kind. We have to practice it. Well, I got this personality disorder. It's the way I'm made. That excuse is amazing, isn't it? You're made to be unkind. You were created in God's image, and you were made, I can't get away from it because I was made to be unkind. No, that doesn't work. Everybody else is rude. That's another, I got to keep up with him. He'll run right over the top of me. I have to keep up. Brain strain. Believe it or not, this is what some of the research says. We are rude and discourteous because of a tech overload of our brains. We use those devices too much, and it taxes our brain. And the final one, in terms of why are we this way, according to the research, is emotional immaturity. We have stunted the emotional and healthy growth of our young people a lot of times. We haven't allowed them to fail. We haven't allowed them to be challenged. We haven't allowed them to do some of these things that will develop their character. And so they don't know how to handle it other than, I'm just going to get mad and yell at you. So what do we do about this? These things. Well, we could spend a long time looking at the red letters. And so I've just picked 3 things that we could probably do ourselves in light of kindness. Luke 5:12 through 16. Luke 5:12 through 16 says, Jesus was in one of the towns, and a man came along covered with leprosy. And when he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. Jesus touched the untouchable. In our culture, we don't touch anybody. We have no touch policies. We have rules about no touch, right? Did you know touch indicates care? And we're talking about the right kind of touch, the kind that God taught us. If you think about that story, he could have spoken, and he did that other times. He could have spoken and the guy got healed. He could have just said the word, right? He could have just spoke, but he touched. That's one way we can indicate our kindness. There was another study that studied touches, and I thought this was really interesting. They found the same kind of environment. I think it was a restaurant or something like that. And they studied people in England, France, United States, and Puerto Rico. And they studied just the number of times that someone touched somebody else appropriately in those settings, because touch indicates care. In England, during this time frame when they studied, no one touched anybody. They had 0 touches. Nobody touched. Like touch your shoulder, touch the back of your hand. In the United States, same type of environment, 2 touches in that same time frame, same similar environment. In Puerto Rico, 180 touches were noticed during that same time frame and same setting. Why is that? I don't think outside of where the tourists are that the country of Puerto Rico, and we've had some kids and people go to that area, right, Dust? Right, Ian? I don't understand that one at all. But maybe those people need a hand. Maybe they need a little help. Don't allow anyone to touch you. Didn't we just shake hands? Didn't we just give a hug? Didn't we just give a pat on the back? Jesus touched the untouchable because touch indicates care and joy and gratitude and sympathy. One touch from Jesus and it restored a life. If we want to practice kindness, maybe we should just demonstrate a touch. I meet kids all the time on the sidewalk now that I get out and I'm mowing a little bit, and there was a kid the other day that was walking, and we pulled up and stopped, and he's the kind of kid that needs a touch and needs a hug. And we stopped and talked to him a little bit about some things going on in his life, and I did like this, and he said, "No, you don't want to give me a hug because I've been walking and I'm really sweaty." So I grabbed him and gave him the biggest, greasiest bear hug I could and put as much of my greasy, grass-covered sweat all over him as I possibly could and said, "Now we're even. I love you anyway." Luke 19. One through 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through, and a man was there named Zacchaeus, and he was the chief tax collector, and he was wealthy, and he wanted to see who Jesus was. But being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. I think that's interesting. I must stay at your house today. Second quality that demonstrates care is just stopping and sharing a little time. Who do you stop and hang out with or visit with? It doesn't take long, does it? I don't know if it works this way for you, Herschel, but we mow some places that take about 15 minutes to mow. But they're elderly folks that live there, and so it takes 2 hours to leave. Okay? So you mow their grass, and then nobody's there to talk to them. And it takes 2 hours to get back in the truck to go to the next yard to go on. Right? You're a good man, Herschel. One day we were mowing and I saw this boy who's now a man, and I hadn't seen him since he dropped out of high school. And he was walking down the street, and I was putting the lawnmowers on, and I said, "Hey, how are you? Where have you been? I haven't seen you in a long time." And he said, "Well, I've been in jail in Oklahoma." And I said, "Oh, I remember you as a really sharp, nice, kind kid who had all kinds of ability, all kinds of things going on. You were great. You were fabulous. I never saw you get in trouble in grade school at all. You were just great. And he starts crying in the street. He said, nobody's ever said that to me before. What? Nobody's ever said that to me before. Jesus didn't stop, if you notice, and preach at him, telling him he was doing all these bad things and he wasn't going to get to go to heaven. Instead, he said, I'm going to hang out with you today. So those two things so far demonstrate kindness. I just want to give you a touch. I want to just hang out with you for a little while. And now if you want to go back to Matthew chapter 9, verse 20. Just then a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, if I only touch his cloak, I will be healed. And Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, daughter, he said. Your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed at that very moment. Another way to demonstrate kindness is to show compassion for the suffering. Jesus was on his way, remember, in this story, to Jairus' house to deal with a little dead girl. Right? This lady had been bleeding for a long, long time and was unclean, and they say, according to Bible research, she probably hung very low to the ground. She probably crawled or stooped everywhere she went to be unnoticed and to work in that part of her world down here. And that's why she touched the edge of his cloak, or the hem, as some people say. Some translations say. How much compassion do we have for the suffering? When we're on our busy way to do very important things, do we stop and have a little compassion for those that are suffering? What does it take? You know, we could go on with many, many stories of how Jesus demonstrated his kindness. Woman caught in adultery. Boy, we like that one. Oh, sexual sin. We like to accuse people and say this is bad and it's bad and they're bad and this is horrible and that's terrible. Why don't they repent and recover? I heard a wonderful sermon about a person that was talking about people that were homosexuals and so forth, and how good Christian people say, you're not going to heaven, you're going to hell, and so on and so forth. And he said, stop. Just stop. Why don't we lead them to Jesus and let Jesus do the work of changing their life? How would you go about doing that? By demonstrating kindness. Many, many times Jesus showed us what kindness looks like. Fixing breakfast after he arose from the dead, after all of his buddies had left and Peter had done his thing of, I don't know this guy. And Jesus even included, be sure and tell them all, and Peter, if you know that scripture. I like to read that scripture because I am a nobody, and I have and continue to sin and disappoint. And I like, when I read that scripture, to put my name in. Tell my disciples and Mike. So what are we to do? In the book of Micah, verse 8, it says, and this is from the Amplified Version, what are we to do? What does God require of us? What is required? Now that we are Christians, we are in this world, and we are to demonstrate that kindness like that taxi driver who just stopped and gave the woman a ride and let her go see some places because that was her last ride. Like the basketball playing guys that just said, hey, it's good to see you today. How long did that take? How long did it take to say, hi, John? Hi, Mr. Myers? It doesn't take very long. I don't think John was ever late to class saying, hi, Mr. Myers. May have been late to class holding on to his girlfriend, but maybe that was some other time. I don't know. But what is required of us? He has told you, old man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? Except to be just and to love and to diligently practice kindness and compassion. And to walk humbly with your God, setting aside any overblown sense of importance or self-righteousness. Offer a caring touch. Stop and visit. Have compassion for the hurting. And guess who the hurting are? That's all of us. What is that place? The right place? Well, as we finish and we think about doing justly, that means hurt nobody with word or deed today. Say good things. Say hello, good morning, good to see you. Do justly means don't hurt anybody with word or deed. Love mercy means to be guided in conduct to others by loving kindness. And to walk humbly with God, humbly means that the Lord is ultimately the one who gives us the strength and the courage and the ability to live a godly life. So we walk with Him. I told this story to the kids the last time we had an opportunity to talk, and I don't want you to think arrogantly of it, but I didn't know at the time what I was doing. I know now God was teaching me. But when I went to college and went to school, I was an athletic trainer for the athletic department at Emporia State University. And we taped ankles and did treatments and all kinds of stuff in those days medically. When I first started there, I didn't know diddly. I didn't know anything. And the other student trainers knew a lot. And one of the things that Doc Baxter always had us do was to make sure that training room was spotless and cleaned at the end of the day. And we had to mop the floor. And the other trainers, I noticed, were reluctant to go grab the mop. They'd be slow, they'd be detained, they'd be distracted. And I just figured that was the only thing I really knew how to do, was mop the floor. So I went and grabbed the mop. In fact, I mopped that floor more than probably anybody. And I didn't know that was kindness. I didn't know that was being kind to all those people. But every day at the end, I would go grab the mop. And after 3 years of finally working my way up to having the status that I could tape the star athletes, they wanted me to tape their ankles, to tape their hands, to work on their shoulder. I finally got good enough to do that. And so when the real studs came in, they would say, I don't want that trainer, I want Mike. And one day I was taping Billy Baker's ankles. And Billy Baker was probably the toughest linebacker I've ever met in my life. And I was taping his ankles, and he said, what makes you different? I grabbed him off. I just grabbed him off. You know, today in this building, there are two kinds of folks. There are the lepers and the Zacchaeuses and the bleeding woman, and there are those who know the love of Jesus. Today, Deb is going to sing our invitation hymn. And if you are one of those that need someone to just stop, touch, and pay attention to your suffering, it's the day to come forward. Today is the day, if you have been that Christian and now you fall into what Dusty was talking about and what we talked about, that maybe we're good on Sunday, but we're not so good on Monday. And we need to reevaluate that. You're invited to come while Deb sings.